The sun rose over the endless forests of Indiana. The year was 1820. A thin boy, barefoot, with a book under his arm, walked through the dirt roads between fields and trees. His name was Abraham Lincoln, and though the world saw only another poor farm boy, something in his eyes said he was different. Lincoln had grown up in silence, the kind of silence that only poverty can create. His father, Thomas Lincoln, was a hard-working man, honest but uneducated. His mother, Nancy Hanks Lincoln, was gentle and kind, teaching him the only lessons she knew: honesty, kindness, and faith. But life was cruelly short. When Abraham was just 9, a mysterious illness swept through their settlement, the milk sickness. It took his mother's life. The cabin felt empty after that, darker, quieter. He carved a wooden board with the words, "Nancy Hanks Lincoln, my mother." There was no marble, no stone, just love carved into wood. Even as a child, Lincoln understood loss. But instead of breaking him, it made him think, why do good people suffer? Why do some live free, and others in chains? Questions that no one around him could answer began to fill his young mind. After his mother's death, Lincoln's father remarried. His new stepmother, Sarah Bush Johnston, was warm-hearted and treated Abraham as her own. She brought books into the cabin, the Bible, Aesop's fables, Robinson Crusoe, stories that opened doors in the boy's imagination. At night, when everyone slept, Abraham would sit near the fire, reading until his eyes burned. The flickering flames lit up his face as he whispered words aloud, tasting their meaning. Every page felt like a world waiting to be discovered. There were no teachers, no schools, no guidance, just curiosity. And in that curiosity, Lincoln found his purpose. People in the village began to notice him. "That boy reads too much," they said, half amused, half doubtful. He didn't care. He would walk miles to borrow a single book, sometimes reading it while walking back home under the moonlight. By his teenage years, Lincoln was already different from other boys. He was tall, strong from farm work, yet quiet and thoughtful. He worked splitting logs for fences, earning the nickname the rail splitter. His hands were rough, his clothes simple, but his mind was sharp. He once said to a friend, "My father taught me to work hard, but not to love it. My mother taught me to love learning." That love became his strength. He began to study not just stories, but ideas of law, history, politics, poetry. Words fascinated him. He practiced speaking to trees, pretending they were his audience. He learned how to make his voice steady, his words clear, his thoughts organized. When a neighbor asked him why he worked so hard at reading, he smiled and said, "The mind is like a field, if you don't plow it, it grows only weeds." In 1830, the Lincolns moved west to Illinois. Abraham was 21, tall, quiet, and restless. America itself was changing, new roads, railways, towns, and a new hunger for progress. But behind that growth, old wounds remained of slavery, inequality, poverty. Lincoln saw it all with young but wise eyes. He left his family to make his own life, wandering through villages until he reached a small town called New Salem. The town was rough but full of energy. There he found work, chopping wood, lifting barrels, working in a small general store. He quickly became popular. People liked his honesty and humor. He was poor but proud, uneducated but clever. He would read newspapers aloud for others, tell jokes, and settle small disputes fairly. One local woman said, "If you ask Abe a question, you'll always get the truth, even if it hurts." That honesty became his identity. But life in New Salem wasn't easy. When the store he worked for failed, Lincoln tried to start his own business with a partner. The venture collapsed, leaving him in heavy debt. It took him years to repay it, every dollar earned the hard way. He called it "my national debt." Yet he paid every penny. During this time, Lincoln served briefly as a volunteer in the Black Hawk War, though he never saw real combat. Still, his courage and fairness impressed the men he led. They elected him captain, the first time anyone had chosen him as a leader. After the war, He returned to New Salem with a new idea: politics. He ran for the Illinois state legislature. His campaign speech was simple. If elected, I shall be thankful. If not, I shall be content. He walked door to door, shaking hands, helping neighbors, fixing fences, not with money, but with effort. When the votes were counted, he lost. It was his first public defeat. Most men would have stopped. But Lincoln didn't. He later said, "My path is slow, but I never turn back." He decided to study law, not in a university, but alone. Borrowed books became his teachers. He read late into the night, sometimes sleeping only a few hours. He would copy entire legal documents by hand just to memorize them. People laughed at him, a poor store clerk trying to become a lawyer. But within a few years, he had done it. He passed the exam and began working as an attorney. His courtroom style was unique, simple, honest, direct. He spoke like a common man but thought like a philosopher. One story tells of a farmer who couldn't afford a lawyer. Lincoln took the case for free and won it. When the man tried to pay him a few cents, Lincoln said, "Keep it. Buy something for your children." To him, justice wasn't a business, it was a duty. Through his 20s and 30s, Lincoln built a reputation as Honest Abe. He was loved by ordinary people, the poor, the farmers, the workers, because he was one of them. But success didn't erase his pain. He fell in love with a young woman named Anne Rutledge, kind and intelligent, who believed in him when others didn't. They dreamed of a life together, until she fell ill and died suddenly. Lincoln was devastated. He withdrew from people, fell into deep depression, and spent nights walking alone by the river, whispering to the stars. He once told a friend, "I am the most miserable man living. If what I feel were equally distributed to the whole human family, there would not be one cheerful face on earth." But slowly, he began to heal, through work, through purpose, through serving others. He said, "I have been driven many times to my knees by the overwhelming conviction that I had nowhere else to go." By 1834, Lincoln's efforts began to pay off. He ran for the legislature again, and this time, he won. The boy who once read by firelight now stood in the State House, representing his people. He didn't wear fine clothes or speak fancy words. He spoke plainly, truthfully, and people listened. His honesty became his power. Every step of his journey, the books, the losses, the failures, had shaped him for this. He didn't rise because of wealth or luck. He rose because he learned. Because every time life knocked him down, he asked, "What can I learn from this?" That mindset, the power of learning, became his greatest weapon. As the 1830s ended, America was racing toward new challenges. The nation was expanding westward, but slavery was spreading with it. Arguments over right and wrong, freedom and ownership, were heating up. Lincoln, still a young man, watched quietly. He didn't yet have the power to change the country, but the seed was already growing inside him. He had seen pain. He had known hunger. He had lost people he loved. And through it all, he had learned that true strength comes not from comfort, but from struggle. One evening, as he rode his horse home after a long day in court, the sun was setting behind the Illinois fields. The sky burned orange and red. He stopped for a moment, looking at the horizon. He whispered to himself, "Someday, this nation will need something more than clever men. It will need honest men." He didn't know then that one day, those words would define him. For now, he was just a lawyer, walking dusty roads, carrying books, chasing justice for others. But destiny had already chosen him. He had built his foundation, not with wealth, but with wisdom. Not with pride, but with patience. Not with power, but with purpose. And so the boy who had nothing had now become a man with something far greater, a voice. A voice shaped by pain, trained by struggle, and guided by truth. Soon, that voice would echo through a divided nation, and change history forever.